Well, I didn't cover the Norwegian territories in the Norway video, so I'm going to do that now.
Ah, Norway. I loved it in the video, it was so fun to make, and I just love Norway, it's such a great country. So first of all, Peter the First Island. Peter the First Island is a small Norwegian island which is located just a little bit west of Antarctica. The treaty is subjected to the 1960 Antarctica Treaty, meaning basically that no country owns it, and it's an international territory, meaning only scientists are allowed to go on it, and the odd tourists with special permission from the Norwegian Polar Institute. The island is not inhabited permanently, and so being part of the treaty, the island has been left alone from basically everyone. Well, its history isn't very long. So it was first discovered by a Russian explorer, this guy, I don't know how you pronounce his name, in 1821, who named it after Peter I, Emperor of Russia, but he never landed on the island due to just so much ice nearby. It was then ignored because no one cared about it and practically everyone forgot about it anyway. Until in January 1910, this French explorer, I don't know how you pronounce his name, led an expedition with his crew and his ship, which confirmed the Russian explorer's discovery, but they also did not know how to land because it was just way too much ice. In 1926 and 1927, Norwegian expeditions kept trying to land on the island, but yet again they failed because of the ice. The first successful landing was in 1929, financed by this man, Lars Christiansen. This caused Norway to declare that it was their island and so officially annexed it in 1931. It then became a dependency in 1933 and then was kind of left alone until 1948 when yet another Norwegian expedition landed on the island. Ever since then, the island has been visited by the odd tourists, and more scientists have visited, like the ones in 1987 who spent 11 days on the island to research the wildlife on the island, so seals, penguins and birds, and produced an accurate map and also to build a weather station, which they did. The latest expedition happened in 2006. There, done. The next island to look at is Bouvet Island. This island, other than having a weather station on it with the odd scientists who temporarily live there, is not inhabited. The island is known mainly for being the most remote and hardest place to get to in the entire world. Being geographically closer to Antarctica than Africa, the closest bit of land to you that is inhabited would actually be Tristina da Cunha, which is the most isolated inhabited part of the world. Now why is that Norwegian? So the island was first discovered by Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Levier in 1739. He named it after himself. Unaware that it was an island, he believed he may have found the rumoured southern continent, but he was wrong. James Cook did try to find the supposed Cape in 1772, but never found it because obviously we know now that it was an island. The next person to find the island was in 1808. James Lindsay was the first to sail on all sides of the island, confirming that it was an island, not a cape. In 1825, the next confirmed landing occurred when George Norris landed on the island. He claimed it for Great Britain, naming the island Liverpool Island. Ages later, in 1893, Joseph Fuller and his ship Francis Elian next sighted the island but did not find a suitable place to land. A little while later, in 1898, German biologist and explorer Carl Chun's Vladivia expedition saw the island, but he did not land due to rough sea conditions. He was the first person to accurately place the island on the map. In 1927, the island was once again landed, this time by the Norwegians, who then placed the flag and claimed the island for Norway and built a hut. At first, Britain protested the Norwegian annexation, but eventually gave up the claim because it's just a useless island. The island became a dependency in 1930, and after that point nothing really happened except the odd ship that visited the island like the South African one that did in 1950. In 1964, an old lifeboat was discovered on the island by the South Africans, creating many conspiracy theories surrounding it. In 1979, the most interesting thing occurred in its history. An unexplained double flash occurred which still confuses people to this day. Some theories are that South Africa, along with Israel, tested a nuclear bomb. and then a few more expeditions happened along with the odd cruise ship stopping off there. Done! Now finally, in the south of the world there is Greenland land, which is Norwegian Antarctica. Nobody lives here permanently, though there are scientists who live here temporarily though. Now far to the north lies Jan Mayen Island, which is a little bit similar to the other islands we've discussed. The island is uninhabited, with up to 40 scientists living on it temporarily, in the only building which is the weather base. Now again, why is this Norwegian? Well, the island was first discovered way earlier by the Dutch, who used it as a base from where they hunt whales by about 1610. Though this is disputed, as Vikings or Irish monks may have settled on the island, though nobody is really 100% sure. The first accurate map of the island was made by William Jans Bleur, a Dutch explorer who produced a map of Europe in 1620 with the island on it. For decades after this, the island was a whaling base. Then by about 1650, the island was abandoned. 200 odd years later, in 1882, the Austro-Hungarians, who were there on mapping purposes, stayed on the island for 1 year. Then in 1921, the League of Nations gave the island to Norway as they owned Svalbard. In World War II, the island was occupied by the Allies in 1940, but a small German weather team landed on the island in November 1940. Unfortunately for them, the British picked it up on radar and arrested them. And they left, but they came back a little while later in 1941, and the Allies then built like another weather base on it, but it was abandoned after the war. And finally, a German plane crashed on the island. Done! And now finally, Svalbard. This is the last faraway territory of Norway, which is like an archipelago and is the only permanently inhabited all year round territory of Norway. The archipelago is fascinating because it actually has an old Soviet town which is called Barentsingburg. I think that's how you pronounce it. Today it is a Russian town only relevant for the mining of coal. And also tourism. Now Svalbard is a very interesting place because of three main reasons. One, it's actually got people permanently inhabiting the archipelago. Two, you legally have to carry a gun as there are way more polar bears than people. There are just over 2,600 people living permanently in Svalbard, while there are around 3,000 polar bears. And the third most funniest thing is that you are not allowed to legally die on the island as your body doesn't decompose, so it stinks. And now finally, why is this Norwegian? So, history, briefly. The island was first rumoured to have been discovered by the Vikings around 800 years ago, but this is disputed. The first time it was known to have been discovered was by Dutch explorer Wilhelm Barents, who produced a map in 1599, calling it the New Land, which I love the original name. Anyway, he didn't actually land on the archipelago. The first landing was by the English in 1604, which did so for hunting the walrus on the archipelago. For the next few years, European powers only went up there to continue to hunt walrus and seals, not knowing of the valuable oil reserves off the coast of the islands. In the 1890s, rich tourists came to the islands, establishing a small Arctic tourism industry. In the early 1910s, the sovereignty of the islands was discussed between different countries, with Norway being the leading figure. However, talks ended when World War I erupted, when in 1920 the islands were fully given to Norway if they signed the Svalbard Treaty, which basically said we can establish towns on the islands but not for military purposes, which Norway signed. In World War II, the islands were left ignored after Germany invaded Norway, though they did evacuate the towns. Germany did raid Svalbard once in 1943, but the few people who remained never really worried too much about the World War. Throughout the next few decades, tourism has increased in the archipelago, mainly because of its beautiful scenery. It even has its own school and university, making it the most northern university in the entire world. In 2018, the islands hit global headlines when a Russian robbed the only bank on the island and was arrested a little while later. This was the first robbery in the archipelago's history. Today, the archipelago is known for its unusual rules, strange settlements, and unique wildlife and stunning natural beauty. Svalbard will always remain one of the coolest and most northernmost places you can go to. I hope you enjoyed the video. I love Norway and I really enjoyed making a video on it. Check out my other Norway video if you haven't, and as always, thanks for watching.